Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to The Money Factor. Many managers would like to get the benefits of a high-functioning team, but they often end up with a work group. With our guest, Lisa Giruzzi from Transformational Conversations, we're going to discuss a way to get from one to the other and looking at some really basic aspects of the situation. I want to welcome Lisa back.
Thank you for having me.
It's our third show together. We started out with social capital.
Yes.
And we went to creating we.
That's right.
And here we are on a new book.
Related.
All related and
Right.
in a nice way.
Yes.
Let's start out by kind of putting a basis to why we talk about this. And I thought teams is a really good way to do it because I see all the time companies that want to be a team.
Yes.
And I'll see on workers' backs, let's say they're picking up something in the parking lot or working in a very menial position, and they have on their back team member.
Yes.
And I can't help but thinking, do they really feel that they're part of the team?
Mm.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but a sign doesn't do it. And
No, nor do nice statements on the wall.
right, and I think it's fairly common because
Yeah.
it's really hard, right, to truly do what we're talking about.
I don't know if it's hard as much as it takes intentionality. It's not something that you can just, like I said, throw some values and mission or principles on the wall and think, oh, everybody's going to jump in, because people need to feel that they're a part of something, that they were included, that it's not something that's just being dictated to them. So I don't know if it's hard so much, because I think human beings naturally connect. I think it's something that we like to do. I think it's something that feeds us and makes us better and better human beings. So I think it's a natural, but there's also been a shift in that over the last, I would say, 50 or 60 years in the workplace, of a more, what we call an I-centric perspective, where people are more in it for themselves and protecting themselves.
So you mean shifting away from we to I?
Well, what we want to do now is to go, it has been an I-centric,
okay,
and now we're proposing a more we-centric approach. And we know from research and business cases that a we-centric environment, a we-centric culture produces far better results than an I-centric, more silo way of thinking. And so the 42 Rules for Creating We is a book about how a real practical, hands-on approach to shifting this way of thinking from it's all about me to it's all about we.
And that's really where we met the second time.
That's
with
right.
the book Creating We, because I had come across this book totally separate from you. And having talked to you about something else, I thought, oh, that's perfect for Lisa. I should try to get her on the show and talk about this book, because I thought this book was really neat.
Yeah, it is a great book.
And it turns out you're connected to the author.
Judith Glazer is not only a friend of mine, but a business colleague. She, about 2 years ago this month, invited 30 people who she called thought leaders, and each of us had an expertise. And it was everything from a neurologist, we had scientists, we had energy healers, and everything in between.
That does sound like a wide gamut.
It was, and I think ultimately there were about 28 of us that came, and what happened out of that was we formed something called the Creating We Institute. And that institute we do a lot of things, from research to we actually have clients that we work with to help them to go from an I-centric to a we-centric approach. It is it's an organization that is part of Judith's company called Benchmark Communications.
I noticed when I read through the co-authors of your book, The 42 Rules for Creating We, that they ranged quite a bit.
Yes.
There were PhDs, people who were captains, you would say, of industry.
Yes.
Fortune 500 type companies, people who had left Fortune 500 companies and started their own company, quite a wide range.
Well, what was interesting when we all got together was, despite the fact that we all have different pathways that we believe gets us to creating this connective, sort of connected place, we all believed ultimately that that's where we want to end up. And so by having all these diverse ways of thinking, it's helped each one of us to grow our own businesses independently, but also to help us to just learn from each other. You know, it's been an amazing gift for me to be a founding member of this organization and a very active participant. And one of our products has been this 42 Rules for Creating We book.
And I think what you just said demonstrates a little bit about what a team is. Basic business principle says that teams are groups of individuals with different talents, and each one may have a special expertise, and so together they can create a lot more than the same person cloned, let's say 42 times or 28 times.
That's right. However, a lot of times people in business, at least this is what I've run up against, and I'm confident that my colleagues at the Creating We Institute would say the same thing, is that the concept of team has been morphed. You know, it has turned into, you know, everybody pulling in the same direction, but not being put on the team for their distinct talents, or that there's this shared sort of experience where, you know, everybody does 10% of the work, let's say, or 50% of the work. But that's just not it. It's not it. I mean, that's not a high-performing team in my...
I think if people think about it in terms of a basketball team where there's only 5, but everybody on that team has a different title and different skills. So a shooting guard, a point guard, a small forward, a power forward, and a center.
Yes.
See, I know my positions here.
Good, because I don't know about basketball.
They're all different. And,
yes.
and if you had a team of 5 guards, I don't think you would be as good as somebody with a Shaq O'Neal in the middle and a Kobe Bryant outside.
Well, and one of the other difficulties is, I think, with a team is, on a basketball team, every one of those positions is valued, or a baseball team, or sports teams. We understand that one, you know, the goalie in a soccer team is as important as the person who's the forward, or what other positions there are. But in work, in business, we often don't have that. We don't value people's skills in the same way. Certain companies will value the producer the most, or the idea person the most. And so there's these disconnects where, rather than feeling like my talents complement yours and together we can create something even greater, there's this competitiveness. And we believe that that's a function of this I-centric culture. And so I can't value your skills as much as mine because I don't have them, and you do. And then what does that mean? And so it creates...
Or I can't value my skills, your skills as much as mine, because I'm in competition with you and I need to step in front of you and take the light.
And prove my worth, you know, to the company. And so that very belief, I think, and I, again, think there's a lot of evidence for this, creates a disconnect for these teams. So on one hand, we're saying, you know, let's be a team, but on the other hand, there's a culture where teamwork is actually dangerous. It's devalued. And so those fundamental beliefs are what need to be addressed first and foremost. And that's, again, what the Creating We book that Judith wrote and this book do, is they fundamentally attack, for lack of a better word, those beliefs that create that competition and that I-centric approach, and give you a different way of thinking that creates a we-centric perspective where we're in it together. We both value our strengths. You're not greater than I am. We're great together, and we're greater together than we can be separately.
And I guess that can be challenging or threatening to someone with either low self-esteem or just somebody who's brought up to believe that I'm the boss here and it's my responsibility and everybody else needs to do it my way, and I'm going to make sure they do.
Yeah, the command and control leadership style has been a very popular one in our culture and a lot of industrialized cultures. However, the productivity and the Gallup organization has done amazing research on this, only about 29% of the U.S. workforce is actively engaged in their work. So you think about it, any particular organization, average organization you go into, only about a third, less than a third of the organization has actively engaged employees. So we're operating on 30% capacity.
Like 20% of our brain, in a way.
Yeah, and what you look at is companies that have figured out how to engage all their employees, Southwest, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters, Roadway Express, Walt Disney, all of the ones that have figured out how to actively engage, not just blah, 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 but really have cultures that actively engage their people. They're not operating at 30% capacity. I'm not saying they're 100% capacity, but they're 68, 90% capacity. What they are able to produce far outweighs, outshines what these organizations at 30% capacity are doing. And so this command and control leadership style is a dinosaur, really. And and things like we-centric thinking show that and give you another alternative. It's amazing to me, the U.S. Navy is engaged in a new leadership, what's the word? Program, I guess, but they're looking at how do we create leadership at every level. And they're using appreciative inquiry, which is my area of expertise, to do that. And so I often...
That's one of those neat words I hope we can go into just a bit.
Sure, I'll talk about the appreciative inquiry. I love talking about that. But I say if the U.S. Navy, which is a command and control environment, and needs to be to a certain degree, can expand their thinking and say, maybe there's something else that's possible. Maybe we can be even greater than we are if we look at a different perspective. And they're using a co-creation methodology to create leaders at every level. And to me, that's just a demonstration. And they're producing great results with it too. Their recruitment's up, their retention levels are up, and they credit it to their widening their lens and saying, let's look at a different way than this, And one more thing I'll say about command and control is it came from a perspective that at the time it was developed, it was necessary. They were bringing people in from the fields to work in these environments. They had no education. They had no understanding of how these kinds of things, manufacturing worked. They were great in the field. They knew how to farm, but they were coming in to do something else. And so you needed this strong leader to be in charge of everybody. It's no longer the case. We now have a very educated workforce. You don't need to tell people what to do. You can actually work with them to get their innovation, their creativity, and then they're much more invested in the process.
And that puts it on more of a scale of not you need it or you don't need it, or it's command and control, or it's totally team. It puts it on a scale where there may have been a more primitive situation where it was necessary, but as we move to a more educated workforce, and we keep moving more and more, and we talk about the fact that we don't have enough people in a lot of technical positions, such as repairing engines, working on the nuts and bolts of nanotechnology, that we need to get people to step up. And we had a program at the library where somebody talked about kind of blue-collar work. Mm-hmm. And he was saying they don't get enough people who are fixing cars who aren't just there to think that all they have to do is do the same thing, because what is the most difficult is what happens when it's not obvious.
Yes, exactly. And the command and control doesn't allow people to think for themselves. And in our current culture, we need workforces, people who are thinking for themselves, who are innovating, who are dealing with whatever challenges come their way, rather than, boss, what do you think? Always looking to somebody else.
Or the bureaucratic, well, that's the rule. Too bad. I know you've got your legs have been chopped off, but this is the rule.
Yes.
You have to sit there.
That's right.
Well, I can't sit there. I can't even get up there.
Yes, exactly. So the we-centric creating We Institute is basically looking for new ways of creating engagement and innovation in the workplace. And I would say that's our number one sort of function. And
So that's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. And because human beings thrive in an environment where they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And, a lot of people get that from their church or their community or their family. But let's face facts. We spend the vast majority of our time working or thinking about working. When you think about what time you get up in the morning to get ready for work, your commute to work, how much time you spend at work, then your commute home, and then getting it off you, the day at work off you, and how that impacts your ability to participate in the community or with your family. Work really does take up a biggest chunk of our time.
Right. It's not your wife calling you to come in from the back 40.
No, exactly. And when you think about just waiting for retirement until you get to have the life you want, to me that's sad. It's like, how about if you can feel like you're a contribution and you get to use your unique talents and you're fully engaged in what you do. That's a life.
For younger people, there's a big benefit here. If we keep working longer, they won't have to pay so much for our Social Security.
That's right. That is a payoff. But if I often have talked to employers about this Y generation, and the Y generation, they feel entitled and all those things. And there's two things I say. One is we created them. They didn't come out of nowhere. We created them because we wanted something better for our children. We wanted our children to have a place to work where they felt great, because we often didn't have that experience. And so that's one thing. And then the second thing I tell them is we need to learn from them, because they want balance. They really want to give and to feel like they're doing meaningful work. I want to learn from them, because I'm like, okay, what can I provide here? How can I create an environment where you can thrive? Because then everybody here is going to thrive. And I'm a firm believer that if we could, rather than try to get the Generation Y to adapt to what we had to suffer through, let's figure out how to create a workplace that they're going to thrive in, because we're all going to benefit from that.
Sounds like that is the main thing. Let's go back before we go into the book, and I want to go kind of part by part,
sure,
so people have an idea about what it is. You said you'd talk more about appreciative inquiry.
Sure. Appreciative inquiry is a methodology that was developed in the early 80s by a professor, now he's a professor. At the time he was a PhD student. His name is Dr. David Cooperrider. I studied with him at the Weatherhead School of Management.
Now we know where that came from.
Yeah, at Case Western University. He's an incredible man. He just is. I could go on and on. But at any rate, he got interested in, he was a student of organizational change and development, and he got really interested in how the kinds of questions he asked altered the person that he was interviewing. And he noticed when he asked people about, share your best experience here at this organization, he got a very different, not just a different response, but the energy of the person changed. Their pride became apparent. And he got interested in, what if we connect these stories of all these great experiences? And that was the beginning of appreciative inquiry. And basically, was
he in psychology?
No, organizational change.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of psychology in there, I guess.
Well, I don't know, ironically is not the right word, but at the same time that he was developing this, unbeknownst to him, Dr. Martin Seligman and a few other psychologists were creating positive psychology, which looks at, why have we been studying mental illness all these years? How about if we studied the causes of joy? What if we looked at the causes of peace? What if we looked at the causes of happiness?
So we could reproduce them.
Exactly. And that's basically appreciative inquiry, as we say, if you want, let's say, a high-performing team in your organization, study where that's already happening. Figure out what are the elements that's making that possible, and then do more of that. And create a vision for what is it you truly want in your organization versus what are we trying to avoid.
And this kind of bends one of the fundamental aspects of marketing. I say aspect, but principle is really what I'm thinking. The SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities,
yes,
and threats. Because it seemed to be saying, don't look so much at the threats.
That's right.
Or the weaknesses.
That's right. We say we've spent far more time looking at strengths, at weaknesses and threats than we need to. I'm not saying don't ever look at them, although I try to encourage my clients to look at them as little as possible.
Well, if the boat is leaking,
Yes,
got to patch it.
That's true, in a life-threatening sort of situation. And again, I'm not saying ignore it. But what I am saying is we have spent so many hours of energy and time looking at weaknesses and threats that we've failed to look at the strengths and what we have going for us.
Well, they're never ending.
Right, and neither is our strengths and weakness and our what's going well. But there's this assumption that that'll take care of itself. But that's not necessarily true. If you can master your strengths, you can literally make your weaknesses irrelevant. As an organization, if you can focus on what works about your organization, what you truly want more of, and you build on that, you can build a far greater organization than by trying to patch the holes, if you will, in your boat, because you'll miss all this opportunity. So the more formal definition of appreciative inquiry is it's the study and exploration of what gives life to your organization. When your organization is operating on all cylinders, when it's really, cooking with gas, what's happening? And that's where it's not about just positive thinking, it's about studying. It's about finding the elements of your success, then you can do more of them in the future. It's like you wouldn't study a poor person to try to figure out how to get rich.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. So why are you focusing on what you don't want so much, not you, but why as an organization, only focusing on that? Although the SWOT analysis mentions strengths, it doesn't spend a lot of time
No, it
there.
treats them equally.
At
least in terms of, you've got 4 letters.
That's right. Well, the work that we do in appreciative inquiry, we use what we call SOAR, which is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. And so we're looking at the strengths of your organization, what are the opportunities, what are your dreams, what are your aspirations, and then what results do you want to produce. And so we use a SOAR acronym rather than the SWOT. And you notice there's no weaknesses in there.
No,
right?
I noticed that. There are no threats, no weaknesses.
Yeah.
Very good.
And appreciative inquiry is a very engaging philosophy and methodology. It fundamentally believes that one of the ways that human beings operate at their best is when they feel a part of something, when they're engaged in creating their own future, and when they are allowed to create and innovate. And so that's why it goes right along with this philosophy of creating we.
Well, if they're excited about something,
Yes.
there's energy there.
Exactly. And even if your idea doesn't get used, but if you believe that it was considered, it may have led to something else being addressed. You can see your contribution in it. You're far more likely to jump on board and, row with everybody else rather than be like, they didn't even listen to me, or why should I care about this? They don't care about me. And that's what you see in a lot of organizations where people don't feel cared for. Not because they're not trying to take care of them, it's because their voice isn't heard.
And that seems like it's a very inexpensive way to motivate people, because in cybernetics or systems analysis, there are all these feedback loops, and once you get something growing, like the economy is dropping or it's going up, it tends to go up and overshoot.
Yes.
So if you try to just, and I think most parents know this, if you try to get your child to do something by paying them, the price keeps going up.
That's right. But one of the things that's, I think why this book is so timely, in fact, because I think people are ready for it, but also because every one of these 42 rules doesn't cost anything. There's not a fee attached. There's no adding more benefits or, giving more time off, or all the different ways that people try to motivate people, which I'm not saying they shouldn't do. I think people should be well paid and well cared for in those ways. But that in and of itself is not going to get you a motivated workforce, because there's always someplace else you can go and get that. Where if you have a culture that allows people to be their best self, and they feel cared for in a much more than a pat on the back or a monetary way, they feel cared for in an emotional way and in a connected way, they're going to be loyal to you in a way that you can't even imagine. And they're going to be looking out for the company. They're going to be looking out for, where are we losing money? Where do we need to put our focus? And those are the kinds of employees that I think every company I've ever worked with, they want.
Absolutely.
It doesn't come just by wishing for it. It comes from providing an environment where that can grow. I saw a quote recently, and I have not been able to find out who to attribute it to, but it basically says that farmers do not grow crops. They provide an environment where crops can grow. And I believe that is what the company's and organization's responsibility is to create an environment where their people can grow and be the best that they can be.
I think that's a very motivating quote also. It really is pretty neat. I mean, when I think about a farmer, I don't think they think that they are God. Because, I mean, the growth of a plant is something, it's almost like a miracle. We can't understand it. We could be scientists all we want, but
right.
As a child, you sit back as a child scientist and say, wow, it's just awesome. And so
it's happening independent of you.
Yeah.
All you're doing is providing an environment. I don't mean all like it's not important. Of course it's important.
No, the environment is crucial.
Right. You know, I use this analogy when I give speeches, is if we took a rose bush, a very expensive rose bush, and we put it in the ground, but we didn't pay attention to the soil, and we didn't pay attention to the water, how we watered it, how we fed it, we put it in the wrong sunlight, and the thing died, we don't kick the bush. We go, man, I screwed up.
Right.
I did it because I put it in there. But when we get an employee, we get this potential, this brilliant potential that's brought to us, and we don't pay attention to the environment we put it in. We just throw it out there and we say, good luck. And that person fails, we look over there and we blame that person. They failed. Rather than saying, what was the environment? Did I really set this person up to win? Did I allow this group of people to really surpass their expectations, or did I limit them in some way? And I think that's incumbent on organizations.
And we shouldn't have to even do that. If we're doing appreciative inquiry, we wouldn't be in that situation in the first place.
I agree. And I think many of the other rules that are in this book point to ways that you can today, right this minute, alter the way people are communicating, way that people are connecting with each other, and all of those things. You can that quick change.
Let's get to the book.
Excuse me.
But as we do that, let's put it in context.
Sure.
For me, there's a context because Creating We came first, and now that this comes out of the Creating We Institute,
That's
obviously, it must be like the mothership here.
It is.
So how do the two books relate? What does one do? What does the other one do?
Well, I think the Creating We book, the original book, introduces the concept, gives you the not only the theoretical but the evidence for it, and gives you some sense of how to do it. This book is far more practical. We call it a hands-on practical guide to organizational change and leadership development, because you can literally turn to any page in this book and do what it tells you to do, and you will see a change.
So you don't have a lot on what is appreciative inquiry. You
No.
ought to know that, but here you
don't need to
tools.
know. You don't really need to know appreciative inquiry or even.
So if you do the right thing, it's going to cook.
Exactly. It's for example, one of the rules that I wrote is called creating shared meaning, and that aligns with a principle of appreciative inquiry called. Two of them actually. One is the anticipatory principle, and the other is the wholeness principle, and they're supported by evidence and all those things. But I never mention appreciative inquiry in this book because it's not necessary to know why it works. What's necessary is to know, what do I do? If I want a team, let's say a Creating We culture, what do I need to do?
So once you know you want a team, once you know that it needs to be a we team, then this book is useful.
Exactly. And you just turn to that page, let's say create shared meaning, and it says to you why you need it. It gives you an example of a place, of a real life story of a client of mine where they use this principle and how it worked, and then some steps that you can actually take. It's very short. There's each rule is only 2 pages long. I think 800 words was the limit to our each rule. But those 800 words are very powerful. They're, you think about how many words got thrown out, and those words got kept,
right,
because they were the ones that said what needed to be said. Where the Creating We book, I don't remember, it's like 300 and some pages. It's a pretty thick book, and it's got a lot of the concepts, and it's a terrific book, and I highly recommend it. But that book is far more conceptual and it is a useful guide. But this one is sort of, I hate to use this term, but it's down and dirty. It's you want a Creating We culture, you want to change the culture.
The nuts and bolts, we sometimes
nuts
say.
and bolts. That's better said. Then pick up this book, turn to a page, and just start. You don't need a PhD, you don't need a MBA, you don't need any letters behind your name. You don't have to be the leader of your organization to use this book. You can be a team member. You can be somebody who, bags the groceries or or you can be the manager of a store or the teller at a bank or the bank manager or anywhere in between. And this book will make a difference in how your organization operates.
Now, how did you divide the book up? Is there a logic to it? You know, there are 42 rules, but...
Well, it was an interesting process because, you know, we had to create we ourselves, right?
Okay.
And we're always, you know, we all live in different parts of the world. I think there's 40 of us now, 40 or 45 of us, I can't remember. But we live all over the world. So we do a lot of our work virtually, and we meet generally once or twice a year. We have a summit. But in this process, it was amazing. You know, people think, oh, it must have been a horrible thing for 18 and 19 authors. It wasn't. It was wonderful. We said, we're going to do it, and then we created a process, and then we just went from there. So what happened was, anybody who wanted to participate, we submitted the rules that we felt should be included. And then those got categorized by, you know, sort of how they fit. So you notice the book is, I think, seven different sort of frames.
I had to count them,
Yeah. Well, there were 8 originally, now there's 7. But basically, those are the spaces that an organization would move through to create we. So for the first one is shatter old paradigms. That's the first section. And you think about it, in order to create we, you have to give up that I-centric, I'm in it for myself mentality.
And they can't make it if I don't tell them everything.
Exactly, like, you know, they need me kind of. So that paradigm needs to get shattered, we call it. I like to call it a little crack in the veneer, you know, so you can at least see the light and say, maybe something else is possible.
I'll give you a chance.
Yeah, so that's the first section. And now, if you pick this up and went to Rule 26 and used it, it's just as powerful
So it could be a cookbook.
Exactly. Either way works. But when we were putting it together, it made sense for us to have an order to it, so that if somebody started at Rule 1 and then went to Rule 42, there's a progression. It's not necessary to get the value out of the book, but at the same time, we wanted there to be a logical progression.
I read it, and I think that was a really good choice, because it sometimes takes more than 2 pages to get a general idea across.
Yes.
So you have maybe 6 or 7 different perspectives on each section.
That's right. And different, they're sort of like, it's like a puzzle almost, you know, they kind of fits here, this fits here. And you could read Rule 41 and you'll go, oh, well, that's why those 6 rules, you know, rule, you know, whatever, 5 through 11, oh, now they make more sense. So they build on each other, and they're also powerful independent of each other. I will say that Rule 1 and Rule 42 are the same in every Rule 42 Rules book, because 42 Rules is a series of books.
Okay.
Series is not right, but there's a...
well, it's like the Dummies series.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Series might be right. So the first one is the rules are meant to be broken, right? And we got to write rules are meant to be broken from the creating we standpoint. And Rule 42 is create your own rules.
Okay.
And so we wrote all 42, but those 2 titles were part of the structure.
And I like the second one, because it talks about finding the I and the we.
Yes.
Which I think people struggle with. There's got to be a relationship.
Absolutely.
Nobody's going to just say, I don't exist anymore, I'm only working for the good of the organization.
That's right. And I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of times when I talk about creating we, people listen that way. They think it means there's no I in team. And one of our rules is there is an I in team, right? Because that mentality has been the there is no I in team has been the sort of the traditional approach. And we say that that's not what we're talking about with creating we. What we're talking about is a we that allows the eyes to shine. And we mean that both ways. You know, that I, as an I person, I get to be great inside this we, but also my eyes are going to shine, because I'm going to be so happy and proud of who I get to be and the greater accomplishment that we had. I know that I was an integral part of that. So that is what we're talking about with creating we. It's not one or the other. There's a balance between the I's, the individuals, and the we culture that we're proposing.
So any other sections we should mention before we...
I think that the fundamental recognition is that there are different spaces that you move through. Like the last one, I think, is words create worlds. forgive me.
Expand belief systems and
Yes.
perspectives.
Yes, that's the last one. Okay, so one of the things that we are focusing on there is to sort of leave people in a wider frame of mind than they started the book. You know, our assumption when people read this is that they have come from that I point of view. By the end, it's more of an expansion of who you are and, you know, what's possible. And that these 42 rules are ours now. Have at it, you know.
I think that's a really good way to end, and it's a difficult one for me. I'm kind of working and thinking that through, because you think of context and dimensions, it always makes things bigger and more complicated. On the other hand, it enriches everything.
That's right.
It just takes a little effort to get and break loose of some of the thinking that we're currently holding and opening up.
Yeah, because in some ways it serves you. You know, that thinking. It's not, I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying you have to question, is it producing the results you want it to produce? You know, it's like if you keep going down the same tunnel and you get to the end, there's no cheese at the end of that tunnel, and you keep going back down the same one, who's crazy, right?
Right.
And isn't that the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result?
And I think the alternative, the corollary, is also the definition of creativity. You take a situation where things seem a little different, and you put in some thinking that you didn't know was going to be there before.
Yes.
It's something that you've added to it.
Yes. I just wrote an article for my newsletter last month. It was called Curiosity Enlivened the Cat, because, you know, this whole concept of curiosity killed the cat, you know, gave curiosity a bad name, you know, and this desire to sort of control things and, you know, have them be predictable. Well, that kills creativity, and that is, you know, I'm not saying that there isn't a time and a place for that. But again, I think this black and white thinking of one or the other needs to be changed to a much more gray area. That there are times when curiosity and chaos is a beautiful thing, and having that wonder allows for new things to emerge. And then the times when you need to control things, you know, to sort of make that smaller and smaller. Because allowing people to sort of give their best thinking to you could give you something far greater than what you as an individual can anticipate or even, you know, make happen. So, you know, that's the premise, I think, behind the whole we-centric perspective is, you know, allowing people to do what they do best, which is create.
And that also enriches the company.
Yes.
And the country.
Yeah, and the world. Exactly.
Yeah, let's not stop there.
Well, and the thing is that believing that there's one way to do something, I think, you know, you could expand it out to there's one way to, you know, to live, you know, or any of those things where if you actually can start to appreciate that there's a lot more ways to get to the goal. You know, this sort of goes full circle to where we started, which was Judith invited these 30 or 40 people who were so far ranging, and what we created out of that was, you know what, we have the same goal with a lot of different pathways, and my pathway isn't right and your pathway isn't right, but how can my pathway enhance yours and how can yours enhance mine? And I think when we start to appreciate all these different pathways, and then we're able to choose, this works for me, that doesn't so much work, it works for you, great. You know, let's see.
Kind of like a toolbox. I was told by a carpenter once, a master carpenter, that a real master doesn't need a lot of tools because they're so good, and they can do with a hammer and a few other things what someone else can't do with everything. On the other hand, I think we work a lot better when we have a nice sander that's got a tube that sucks the dust out of the air,
right.
keeps us from getting sick.
That's right. And those are all things that got created. If we just said, this sander was good enough for my father, you know, and you're my grandfather.
And your hair's all white,
Granddad. Meanwhile, you know, we've always innovating new ways to do things. And I think we're far better at innovating new tools, electronics, and those things than we are at innovating new thinking. And that's where I think as human beings we need to press ourselves, is what's the thinking that we have? Is it working? And by working, is it producing the result we want to produce? Or is it limiting us? You know, one of the key things I do with my clients is examine their limiting beliefs, because the beliefs we have produce the actions we take. And if we don't explore what are the limiting beliefs we have and allow ourselves to expand, you know, it prevents us from producing the results or producing the outcomes that we want.
I think that's a good way to end.
Okay.
So we want good outcomes.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we'll put the book up, give people a chance to see what it is. And,
Okay.
I think it'd be useful to just about anybody.
And it's available right now, so
Amazon, I know.
Amazon.com or at the creatingweinstitute.com
Okay.
website.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Great. And I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show, that you tune in again next time, and that you have a great week. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.